Hello, Petals. How you doing? I thought I'd do a little recording today because A, we got a little smidge of snow. Not 3 foot drifts or anything, but a little bit of a dumping, which will probably be gone by the end of the day. I'm wanting 3 foot drifts like we had like a couple of decades ago. I actually don't think I've seen snow like that here since about 2008, 2010. Although we did have the Beast from the East in 2013. I remember driving to work in that blizzard. That was an experience. I actually have it on film because it was filming at the time. I didn't have my phone in my hand, mind. But yes, got a little bit of snow today, so that's exciting. I don't think there's really anything else much going on. Oh, the power cuts, so that's another reason. I've had 3 power cuts this morning. You know, they've kind of like been whiffling on about having like snow on the news for like the last goodness knows how long, and then there's not an infrastructure that goes, oh, might need to be careful in case there's a snowflake or a leaf on the line. Oh my goodness, I remember when a leaf on line would stop the railway. My goodness. But how are you doing? How are things going? Thank you so much for interacting in the comments and the emails. I do appreciate it. And it's so nice being able to keep up with you all because I think, as little as it may be, we do have such a nice little community on here. And I know I go on about it a lot and I'm sorry, but I just want to tell you I appreciate you every time. I've already made a dedication for this particular book and it's important. Just because it's absolutely one of my favourite Tom Holt books of all time. It's so much fun and it's good to see that everybody's so engaging with it. So that's pretty awesome. Right, I'm still umming and ahhing whether to finish off doing Shine in the Chocolate Factory, but we shall see. So, if you would so kindly hit that notifications bell if you haven't already. If you like the chapter at the end, if you could hit the like button, don't forget on that one because that really does help. And yes, share, subscribe if you want to. No problem if you don't, but it really does help to keep the lights on, especially seeing the hamsters are buggered off onto Barbados for the winter. It's getting a bit too chilly here for them, so they've gone, no, we're off. And they've sent over the polar bear. Now, the names of Eric and Fluffy are quite like, so we shall call him Mr. Eric de Fluffiness in honour of Nadia. So, yes. Right, anyway, 2.5 minutes. I have got to start reading before the power goes out again. Here Comes the Sun by our beloved Mr. Thomas Holt, Chapter 2. Jane was not a naturally discontented person, or, at least, that was what she'd always led herself to believe. It was just that there were certain things that she found hard to put up with. These things tended to change their shape depending on circumstances, such as clouds can sometimes be great big fluffy dragons and sometimes wisps of low-quality cotton wool. Narrator's note, sorry, why did I think about chewing cotton wool at that point? Sometimes it would be the plight of famine victims. Sometimes it was the incredibly feckless way the stationery supplies were managed at work. And sometimes, quite often, and in point of fact right now, it was the punctuality of the 42A bus that really managed to get to her. If there was a common factor, it was probably sloppiness. The weather could do with a sorting too. The British nation, she said to herself, and its unique relationship with water. We either sail over it or stand under it. It took the Chinese, though, to invent the umbrella. Since the 42A had patently been ambushed by the hole-in-the-wall gang, set on fire and abandoned somewhere further up the line, she decided to walk the mile from the office to the station. She splashed resolutely up the road, trying to avoid the larger puddles and speculating as to whether ditching fins and growing legs had been the evolutionary breakthrough everybody reckoned it was. She was coming to the conclusion that the really smart move would have been wings and floats, like the Spruce Goose. Narrator's note, I used to go to a pub called the Spruce Goose in Basingstoke before I used to go to the cinema. Hey, them what days. Never knew it was a plane until I went there. Right. When she bumped into a fellow pedestrian and nearly knocked him over into a puddle the size of Lake Fan. Sorry, she said. The man, who was so sharply dressed you could have used him for open heart surgery and, despite the lack of hat or umbrella, was as dry as a bone, smiled at her. Not at all, he replied, but you're wrong about the wings, you know. Jane's jaw flopped down like undercarriage. What? She said. Wings, the man replied, still smiling. If the ancestors of mankind had grown wings, they wouldn't have needed to develop manual dexterity in the use of tools. That way their brains wouldn't have adapted and become what they'd eventually become. Result, you wouldn't be a human, just a big pink bird, and the chimpanzees would be feeding you breadcrumbs in Trafalgar Square. Just think about it. He nodded, sidestepped into the puddle, which divided on either side of his foot, and walked on, leaving Jane standing in exactly the right spot to receive the full force of the spray when a 42A bus went neatly through the puddle a few moments later. Staff was reading a letter. It wasn't easy going, because the script, and indeed the language it was written in, had died out centuries before, but he could understand that. The writer of the letter probably hadn't found the need to put pen to paper for a very, very long time. "Dear Sir," it said, translated, "I have to inform you that I resign. You probably don't remember me, though. I saw you once at one of those receptions over the top of someone's head. You were shaking hands a lot and opening something. I've been racing the sun for 777 years, 7 months and a week Thursday, but this is too much and I've had enough. It's a scandal, that's what it is, and they ought to do something about it. I have the honour to remain, etc." Staff sighed and put the letter face down on his desk. They ought to do something about it. Too right, he said to himself, and they will, just as soon as they find out who they are, and normal service will be resumed as soon as possible, and, naturally, we apologise for any inconvenience in the meantime. "Hell," he said aloud. "Sorry, wrong floor," said a voice from the other side of the desk. He looked up and saw kind.Did sitting in the visitor's chair, smiling and looking far more comfortable than he would have imagined possible. "It's a knack," Ganger replied. "You just have to wriggle about until you find a part of the seat that fits." That's what he does, Staff realised. He replies before you speak. Bloody irritating, of course, but certainly conducive to efficiency, like a fax machine. Now, it's not fax machines certainly were not efficient, but I digress, or something. "And?" he said. "Yes," Ganger replied, and pulled a sad face. It looked hopelessly incongruous. Ganger's face was pretty exclusively smile-shaped. "The problem is... how?" "Exactly." "Well," Ganger said, leaning back and folding his arms behind his head, "they have it in a nutshell." Staff capitulated. "All right," he said. "Can we go back over that and fill in the blanks, please?" The sad face melted into the usual grin like grilled cheese. "You were thinking, shit, there's another irreplaceable employee gone and handed in his notice, and what the hell are we going to do now?" I replied, "Yes, because I'm buggered if I can think of anything either. But the fact remains that he's got to be replaced, because otherwise it's going to be all jam for the electric torch manufacturers, but no fun for everybody else. Plus, you'll have to pay the man in the moon double time and a half. The problem is, how do you fill a vacancy like that from the load of rubbish you've got available?" "Exactly. And there you have it," Ganger said, smirking. "In a nutshell. It's very impressive, the way you do that." "Flashy," Ganger replied. "Telepathy is like television or anything. Looks good but doesn't actually help very much in the final analysis. Not," he added quickly, "that it really is telepathy. More a sort of partial insight. Comes in useful in our work." "Ah, yes," said Staff, leaning forward slightly. "I meant to ask you about that." Ganger hitched up one corner of his mouth into yet another isotope of his perpetual smile. "You're quite right," he said, up to a point. Staff growled at him. He laughed. "It's all right," he said. "I'm on secondment. That means I have to play fair. That means you can trust me. Okay?" "Perhaps." Ganger stood up and walked to the window. "Good view you get from here," he said. "All the kingdoms of the earth," replied Staff absently. "Look, who exactly are you lot?" Ganger continued to look out of the window. "Simple," he replied. "We're them rather than us, but we're on your side, really. Is that enough? No! Okay. We're a department, same as all the other departments, but we're pretty well autonomous within the quite strict confines of our brief, and the head of our department gets subdued a lot at christenings. Staff nodded. And all his works? Right on, Ganger replied. Also his pomps. Not that he's got any, really. Not in the last 5 years, at any rate. 5 years? Staff raised an eyebrow. What's so special about... We got put out to tender, Ganger replied. We were the guinea pig, you see. 5 years ago, we were the most hopelessly inefficient department in the whole setup. Surely not. The back of Ganger's head nodded. Straight up. Hopelessly overstaffed, but undermanned at the same time. Work backing up, souls not getting processed, furnaces still powered by expensive, ozone-unfriendly sulphur. And worst of all, costing an absolute fortune. Really, the whole system was on the point of collapse. In fact, there were those who reckoned it had collapsed years before, only in the nature of things nobody had noticed. Staff picked up a pencil and started to fidget with it nervously. Nobody told me, he said. Didn't they? Ganger leaned on the windowsill and swayed slightly. I'm not in the least surprised. Not something they'd want you to find out about, really. Anyway, they reckoned that since nothing they could do could possibly make things worse, they'd try an experiment and put the whole operation in the hands of outside contractors. My lot got the contract, and since then, well, you can judge for yourself. There was a silence, during which you could have counted up to 7 comfortably, and 10 if you gabbled a bit. Then you're not qualified? Ganger laughed. Oh, yes, we're all qualified. I'm not a mortal, if that's what you're thinking. But if you're not a mortal, then you must be... Staff's voice trickled away, like the last drops of water from a turned-off hose. The back of Ganger's head shook. Not necessarily, he replied. Common misconception that. Most of us are left over from previous systems, but... Previous systems? Ancestor worship, Ganger replied. Classical mythology. Odin and Thor. There's one chap works in accounts who used to be Osiris, or is it Anubis? Odd sort of bloke. But in his line of work, it's actually an advantage to have the head of a jackal. Me, though, I'm from philosophy. Philosophy? Absolutely, replied Ganger, with a hint of pride in his voice. Personification of an abstract concept. I'm a child of late 19th century German neo-nihilism, one of Nietzsche's gentlemen, you might almost say. He laughed briefly at his own joke. Sorry, I'm drifting away from the point rather, aren't I? What was I going to say? Yes, what I was going to say is that in our department we do have a few members of staff who were originally mortals. Staff tried to find an appropriate word, or at least a noise, but there wasn't one. Instead, the room was filled with the noise of a jaw dropping. I have that effect on people sometimes, Ganger agreed. I startled the wits out of a girl in the street earlier on. I wanted to talk to you about her later, actually. You use mortals on official business? Ex-mortals, Ganger replied gently. There are limits, naturally. But within those limits... You can't, said Staff, controlling his anger with difficulty. It's unheard of. It's against the rules. It's... evil? Ganger chuckled. Well, it would be, wouldn't it? Will you kindly stop reading my mind? Staff shouted. It's bad enough my having to live in it without strangers poking their dirty great snouts in there as well. He pulled himself together. I'm sorry, he said. But please, just for the time being, could you possibly... There was a pause. Could I possibly what? Ganger said. Thank you, said Staff. Could you possibly just wait for me to say what I'm thinking rather than going and looking for yourself? For one thing, it's bad form. You know, like reading the end of a book before you get to it, and it puts me at a disadvantage. Not really, Ganger replied. I can only read what's there, can't I? And anyway, it's not telepathy, it's just insight. I know what you said. Now you're at it. Oh, shut up! Staff reached for the pencil again and started to chew on it. These mortals, he said tentatively. Ex-mortals. They're ex-mortals, then. Staff felt his teeth meet around the graphite core. I suppose they're all, in menial capacities. Hewers of wood, drawers of water, that sort of thing. Ganger shook his head. Not really, he said. Upper executive, lower administrative grade, mostly. None in the upper grades of admin, but that's because they're relatively new and it all takes time. Dead men's shoes, that sort of thing. For some reason, the phrase made Staff shudder a little, in context. But that's really... He diluted the thought rapidly, just in case someone was peeking. Not really on, mortals... It's never been tried here, you mean? Ganger turned away from the window, and Staff noticed, in the brief fraction of a second it took him before he could cauterize that part of his brain temporarily, that he looked a little bit different. I know it's hard to accept, but we're doing it, and it seems to be working. That's the joy of effectively running our own ship. If we do something outrageous, then who cares? It's just us. Going to the devil in our own way, so to speak, he added deliberately. And if it works... Just a little short chapter there. Yes, so that was chapter 2 of Here Comes the Sun by Mr. Thomas of Holt. Now, I've got to say, going through, the chapters are quite short on this one. Between 15 minutes and 30 minutes, but, at least I can try and do them regularly. They do get a bit more hefty as the book goes on, but, you can tell I'm like flipping up as I go along, like, maybe. Okay, so that was chapter 2. Do you know, I saw the other day, I was thinking of like the SpongeBob SquarePants song, because remember we had that conversation where I've never seen it. And I actually saw a thrash metal version of SpongeBob SquarePants. I was like, what? It was absolutely mind-blowing. It was just brilliant. So, yeah, I'd say metal version of SpongeBob SquarePants. There's quite a few of them, but I don't think I could do it that way. I still haven't learned all the words, because it's like, I think when you're familiar with something, and it kind of like comes as second nature, doesn't it? But it's like when you have to learn a song particularly, and then you kind of like go off on a bit of a tangent, like I did. I was like, oh... I will do it one day. One day. Okay, so, if it's too hot, stay hydrated. If it's too cold, wrap yourself up warm and cosy. And above all else, take good care of yourself and get lots of rest. And we're always here, so please leave a comment if you'd like to, and let us know how you're doing. Let us know what your plans are for the week. I think it's Thanksgiving in America this week. Is it on Thursday or is it this weekend? When's Black Friday? When's Cyber Monday? Oh my goodness, I hope it coincides with my payday. That'd be flipping awesome. Oh, but then it's Christmas. God. Not the biggest fan of Christmas, but over the last few years I have been lucky enough to develop a healthy respect for it that hasn't been there in a couple of decades. So that could be the question of the day. Do you do Christmas? Do you do the holidays? What do you like to do over December? Do you hibernate until the springtime comes? Do you enjoy the winter weather? Do you get winter weather? Just let us know how you're doing. Let us know what this season brings for you. Because we are a week away from December and the end of the year. My goodness, this year has just gone... Maybe it's because I'm getting old. But it has. It zipped by, this one. I'll be glad to see the back of it, to be honest. I mean, it's been 4 years of like, ugh. But, no, I'm not talking about 4 years of the rather phenomenal US management. I'm talking about since the thing happened 4 years ago, which changed the world, and everybody's still gone a little bit mental because of it. I've gone off on a tangent now, and I don't know how I managed to get over here, but I'm going to pull it back and go, right, take care of yourselves, look after yourselves, keep warm, keep cool, keep hydrated. No matter what you do, come back here and come and see us in a couple of days. Yeah, with the next chapter of Here Comes the Sun by Tom Holt. Take it easy, pedal.